So today we're going to talk about factoring when you have an a term or a coefficient that's something other than 1. So go ahead, take a moment, set up your page for factoring Unit 5A Homework 4 with the appropriate date, and questions and comments on the right-hand side before beginning. So sometimes when a is something greater than 1, you can start out by factoring out the GCF like we did in Lesson 1. So here I have 5x squared plus 15x plus 10. I notice that all of my terms are multiples of 5. So I can go ahead and factor out the GCF of 5. 5 divided by 5 would be 1. 15 divided by 5 is 3. And 10 divided by 5 is 2. So it would be 5 times x squared plus 3x plus 2 when I factor out that 5. Next, I can go ahead and factor my trinomial, x squared plus 3x plus 2. I want to take my c term of 2 and find the factors. This is fairly quick since 2 only has 1 times 2. And I know 1 plus 2 is going to give me 3. So my factors will be 1 and 2. So here I'm going to have 5 times my first factor of x plus 1 times my second factor of x plus 2. Once again, once you have your factors, you want to check them to verify that they really do give you your original trinomial back. So first I'll distribute the 5 into the parentheses, and that gives me 5x plus 5 times x plus 2. 5x times x gives me 5x squared. 5x times 2 gives me 10x. 5 times x, 5x. And then I have 5 times 2. And that'll give me 10. Once again, combine like terms. And I get 5x plus 15x plus 10. And that checks back to my original. So let's take a look at another example. What happens if I don't have a greatest common factor? I can't factor anything out of all of these. 3 and 13 are both prime and do not share any factors with 4. So there's another way that you can actually factor this. This is when A and C are both positive. So your first step is you're going to multiply A and C together. So 4 times 3 gives you 12. And that is what you're going to factor as a product of A and C. So you look at 12 and all the possible factors of 12. You have 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. So now I want to know which of these factors will combine to give me 13. And that would be 1 plus 12 would give me 13. So I'm going to use the factors of 1 and 12. So I have x plus 1 and x plus 12. Now because I multiplied my c by a, I have another step to do. I have to undo that multiplication by a. So I want to divide both my factors by a. So I'm going to divide 1 by 4 and 12 by 4. Now 1 does not divide by 4. It would give me a decimal. So I would want to move that 4 up as a coefficient of my x. And it would look like this, 4x plus 1. Now, once the first term is taken care of, let's go to the next term. 12 does divide by 4 evenly. It gives me 3. So my second term would be x plus 3. So once you divide your factors by a, you're going to have 4x plus 1 times x plus 3. Now, let's check it out. We have 4x times x, which gives me 4x squared. 4x times 3, which gives me 12x. 1 times x, which gives me 1x or just x. And then 1 times 3. And this will give me 3. And once again, simplify like terms. I get 4x squared plus 13x plus 3. And that checks back to my original trinomial. Let's take a look at another example. So once again, A and C are positive, but once again, you're going to notice that B is going to be negative. So let's stick with our rules. We're going to multiply A times C, and that'll give me 6. And so now I just need to find all my factors of 6. And so now, out of these factors, which one will combine to give me 7? Now, because my C is positive and my A is positive, I know that since B is negative, both of my factors are going to have to be negative. So when I add them together, I need to get a negative 7. Now, I know that 1 plus 6 equals 7. So negative 1 plus negative 6 would give me that negative 7. So my factors would be x minus 1 times x minus 6. And once again, I want to look at dividing my factors by A since I multiplied by A. Now, 1 does not divide by 3 evenly, so that 3 is going to go up and be a coefficient of my x. And that'll give me 3x minus 1 for my first term. Next, 6 divided by 3 is a negative 2, so it would be x minus 2. Once again, I want to check to make sure these factors will multiply back to my original trinomial. So 3x times x gives me 3x squared. 3x times negative 2 gives me negative 6x. Negative 1 times x gives me a negative x, or a negative 1x. And negative 1 times negative 2 gives me a positive 2. Combine my like terms, and I get 3x squared minus 7x plus 2, which does check back to my original. So go ahead and take a moment, pause, copy, before continuing on to our next example. So let's talk about factoring when AC is negative. And so we're going to talk about here when our C value is negative. So once again, the same steps will apply. We're going to take our A value and our C value and multiply. And we're going to focus on factoring 14. Now, because 14 is negative, I know one of my factors will have to be a positive, the other will have to be a negative. So factors of 14. 1 and 14 and 2 and 7. So what I'm looking at is a combination that will give me 5. And so since one's got to be positive and the other's got to be negative, I know that negative 2 plus 7 gives me a positive 5. And if I do 2 plus a negative 7, that gives me my negative 5. So my factors will be 2 and negative 7. So x plus 2, x minus 7. Once again, because I multiplied my C term by A, I need to divide my factors by A. Now 2 divided by 2 does simplify evenly, and that'll give me an x plus 1. And then when I do a negative 7 divided by 2, that does not simplify to a whole number, so that 2 is going to move up to be a coefficient of my x. So I end up with x plus 1 times 2x minus 7. Now, if these are my factors, I can check it and FOIL it back out to see if I get my original trinomial. X times 2x gives me 2x squared. X times negative 7 gives me negative 7x. 1 times 2x gives me 2x. And 1 times negative 7 gives me a negative 7. Combine my like terms, and my trinomial does check. 2x squared minus 5x minus 7 checks back to my original. Take a moment, pause, copy, before we look at our final example. So what happens when A is negative? So when A is negative, that's an automatic, we need to factor out that negative. So before starting our other steps, we want to factor out a -1. Now, once we do that, we go ahead and treat this like any trinomial. We're going to go ahead and go into our original a times c. And that'll give me a -20. So now find the factors of 20. And once I find the factors of 20, I need a combination that's going to give me a +8. So remember, because it's a -20, one of my factors has to be positive, the other has to be negative. So I'm going to try 2 and 10. So if I do 2 plus a -10, that gives me a -8. I need a +8. So if I do a -2 plus 10, that gives me my +8. So my factors are going to be -2 and a +10. So here I have x minus 2 and x plus 10. Now remember, because I do have those factors where I multiplied my c term times 4, I need to divide both of my factors by 4. Now, neither one of these divide evenly, but if you look at your fractions, they will simplify. So I know that 2/4 will simplify to 1/2. And that 10/4 simplifies to 5/2. So once we simplify, we're going to notice that 2 will be the coefficient of both our x's. And so we're going to start off our equation with -1, since that's the very first thing that we factored out of our equation. And then we'll have 2x minus 1 with the coefficient of 2 moving up. And 2x plus 5 with the 2 moving up as a coefficient here. Now, once we have the complete factored form, we want to go ahead and check it. So we'll start with the -1, and we're going to focus on foiling our parentheses first. So 2x times 2x gives me 4x squared, and 2x times 5 gives me 10x. -1 times 2 gives me -2x. And then finally, -1 times a +5 gives me -5. Keep in mind you want to go ahead and simplify. And then finally distribute your negative in. It's going to change the sign of everything in the parentheses. And that gives me -4x squared minus 8x plus 5, which does come back to my original. Go ahead and take a moment, pause, and copy before continuing on. So here's your try it out. There's 6 polynomials here I'd like you to factor where a is something other than 1. You can break it out into each section for examples. You have factoring out GCF for these two, and you have factoring when AC is positive or negative, and then you have factoring when the A is negative. So go back to those examples to help you factor completely for each one. If you had any problem getting these answers, please make sure you ask questions or bring comments with you when you come to class next. See you next class.